Well, well, welcome everyone. Let me just remove this message from my screen. My name is Kevin Moody. I'm a managing director here at Black Diamond Advisory. I'm happy to be here today to really discuss and really dive into have an interactive discussion in terms of how Delaware North leverages the power of the platform. And really, it's the power of the OneStream platform to transform both planning, decision support, and what they use to guide their organization in the reporting, but also the important features like the table stakes and close and consolidation as well too. So during today's discussion, we will be having, Kathy and Joe, and I'll be moderating the chat with respect to, running the discussion. But Kathy, I'd like to have you introduce yourself to the group here, and then pass it off to Joe as well too.
So welcome everybody. My name is Kathy Williams. I am the director of FP&A for Delaware North. I am proud to say that I just celebrated 25 years with the company. I hold positions, and I have held positions both out operationally at the field as well within the corporate staff here. I look forward to sharing my experience of what I did with the BDA folk with the implementation of the OneStream platform.
That's good. And Joe?
Hi, everybody. My name is Joe Tomlin. I'm a Senior Director of Sales Solutions here at BDA. I've got a long background in consolidations back to 2006 when I started on HFM. I was actually an implementation consultant for a while with OneStream as well. I was certified, and then I worked over into the sales solutions area, so all of the prospecting and scoping and things of that nature related to closing consolidation. Glad to be here today.
Great. And, Joe there likes to be humble. He was also the executive relationship sponsor with respect to Black Diamond Advisory, working with the Delaware North team as well too.
Yeah.
So for today's conversation, we're going to do a quick overview about Black Diamond Advisory. I'll promise you I won't do too much talking. It'll be more focused on Kathy and I and Joe having a conversation. We'll then have Kathy, describe Delaware North and, how Delaware North is really a diverse business. And really how, give a bit of an overview to the folks on the phone here, and then talk really about, the case for change and transformation. Then get into the subtopics of how do you improve the close, looking at transforming planning and the various aspects of how Delaware North transformed planning. Then look at what I would call the coup d'etat around how do they leverage OneStream to improve insights, and how did the BDA team work with the Delaware North team in order to make that a reality as well too. So if we go, who is Black Diamond Advisory? We are really a global leader in the OneStream implementation space. We do specialize in complex FP&A solutions, but we also are an expert with respect to implementing consolidation and reporting. From there, we've expanded our reach to focus on true finance transformation. And with that, we do have a global presence both in EMEA, APAC, and North America, both in Canada and the US, with respect to delivery team with over 150 projects, over 80 architects, and with 125 experts across the globe here. In terms of how we deliver, we look at really what we call the elements of success. And around that is the core OneStream platform that's in the middle here of this slide, around the core functionality that you get when you purchase the OneStream platform. But then also we do have solutions that we built on top of the OneStream platform to make sure that we can deliver in a faster capacity and really harness the full platform capability. With that, we do focus on how we can help the client transform in those spaces through advisory services, and also determine within their industry how to get their project started through the components of items like Basecamp. Now, Kathy, if you want to describe a little bit about Delaware North here, well, that would be great.
Absolutely. So Delaware North is one of the largest privately owned hospitality companies with over 100 years of experience. We do over $4 billion in revenue a year, and we hold operations in the United States, UK, as well as Australia. We have 7 different divisions, main divisions actually, by which we organize and run. One of them being concessions and retail at sports venues as well as airports. We do hotel, retail, and food and beverage operations around and within national and state parks. We have gaming and entertainment facilities throughout the United States and one in Australia. We actually also do very high profile F&B and catering, including a relationship by which we have with the PGA, of which we have a 5-year contract with them. And then we have the Boston Garden within the Boston area itself. The owner of Delaware North actually privately owns the Boston Bruins. So, I always give them a kudos, go Bruins. But we actually own and run the building by which the home to the Bruins and Celtics. So when you talk hospitality, it's a very broad statement and overarching in the industries by which we do run our businesses.
Sounds good. So now if we actually get into, the case for change, through my experience in working with clients to transform planning, consolidation, reporting, and actually delivering that, and with implementing OneStream, the importance is around actually, defining what are those key elements of what you're going to change. And from there, having the implementation team focus on, how that gets applied in the implementation. Kathy, if you could describe a little bit about Delaware North's journey with respect to transformation as it relates to this project, that would be great.
Yeah, so it's really interesting, me stating that I've been with the company 25 years and Delaware North being around for over 100 years. One of the biggest things, and I sat on a number of projects, was getting over the culture by which is Delaware North, right? So there are a lot of things that are very specific of wants and needs of a culture that just is as long as it is. And we needed to, when we actually took on this project, we needed to kind of reel that in and say, what exactly are we trying to do here? We are trying to build a planning and forecasting module. And I know I'm going to have, Joe's going to speak a little bit to the consolidations piece, but overall, the forecasting and the planning piece was such a big part of it. And what did we really need? And we needed to get off of the dependency of Excel, right? That's the purpose of pulling in a platform and using an application and knowing that we couldn't do all the detail by which we did in the past. We needed to have a true overarching grouping from all of our locations with regards to ensuring that everyone was to be standardized as best as we can. Hospitality, again, very broad statement of what we were doing. There are a lot of things that are the same. And where could we standardize and how can we make that better? We needed that full engagement from all of our subs. We needed them to buy into what we were doing. So they were part of our process from very beginning to very end, including actually choosing OneStream as our platform, about 6 months probably prior to us even beginning the implementation process, to being part of the requirements, the build, the testing, and so forth. And that brought a lot of buy-in then, into the overall scope of the project itself. We also needed to make sure that what we were building was a simple enough process for people to understand. We weren't going to build something that was so engrossing that people, again, looking at what forecasting and planning was, that we didn't build something that was so out of tune with regards to what we really needed. And so it was really all of that together that really made this a success. And I could tell you from my many years with Delaware North, this has been really hard to do. Getting over that finish line with a project overall has been, again, very difficult. And this is one I could honestly say that we got over the finish line.
Great. Well, awesome, Kathy. So now if we go into building the foundation, and as we look at improving the close and Joe, if we actually talk about how you leverage the platform to really focus on improving decision making and improving the close at Delaware North, can you describe specific aspects of that implementation, as part of this?
Absolutely. But before we dive into that, Kevin, I wanted to kind of piggyback on what Kathy said. Kicking off this project, I guess it was over 2 years ago at this point. One of the things that we didn't anticipate as a joint implementation team, meaning BDA and Delaware North, was just how intense the requirements and design process was going to be. bringing together those 7 different teams, those 7 different views of not just planning, but also of the consolidation process. Sure, it was corporate in general, but there are lots of inputs to that consolidation process considered. We went significantly longer in the requirements process than we initially anticipated, and that proved really to be the best thing for the project. And we decided that as a joint team early on when we said, hey, look, it looks like we're going to go longer than we thought. And everybody kind of doubled down our investment and said, we're going to make sure to get everybody out there and make sure it's done right. So when you're looking for transformation, it is important to take the time to really do it right. Sure, you can define a process relatively quickly, but without getting the input from all those different parties, it's not going to be successful. So I just wanted to drop that in. Sorry, Kevin.
Great. No, that's awesome, Joe. It is very important to actually consciously on both sides take the time, right, and look at what the process is, make sure that there is alignment to that net new process as well too, and have that conversation back and forth. If we then go to actually improving the close, Joe, if you could talk a little bit about some key aspects of the project as well too at Delaware North.
Sure. So at its heart, this was a Hyperion replacement. So there was the consolidation process in HFM, and there were a bunch of planning cubes that we were all looking to replace. The consolidation process in and of itself was relatively straightforward. Lots of entities all over the world, basically things we've seen in general consolidations. But the key to what we were doing was we had to make sure to build out dimensionality effectively to support the planning process as well. So the subcubes that you see kind of a picture of in there when it talks about AOS and Boston and corporate and gaming, those are identifiers to say, okay, yes, it's going to be one corporate consolidation, but in order to support the data input needs we need for everything else, we have to incorporate that now. Building that process into the consolidation actually made the consolidation go faster, which was something that was a welcome experience for the consolidation team at Delaware North. So instead of having to cycle through every single one of those different departments, for example, we could attribute departments to specific entities because we were coming from a single ERP, PeopleSoft in this instance, and they have a one department to one entity kind of correlation. Because we were able to use those subcubes, we were able to minimize the impact of consolidation times and calculation times by building it out that way. So it proved to be very helpful on the consolidation side, as well as kind of laying the groundwork for what we were doing in planning. So just taking out the underpinnings of what the application looked like and what made it so slow in the legacy system and turning it into something that could be very advantageous in the OneStream platform.
Yeah, and then Joe, I think you made a very key point there. It's not simply like for like, it's actually truly harnessing the power of the OneStream platform, extensible dimensions, and a proper cube design to make sure that there's performance in the application that can glean itself for planning as well as faster reporting as well too. So that's a great point. Now, if we look at how, with respect to managing data, this is actually a pretty cool aspect of the implementation. Joe, if you could speak a little bit around metadata automation.
Right. So the other thing about having a single ERP was the entire process of getting metadata from the ERP into the CPM solution was all handled within that ERP. So any metadata change that was made, Delaware North already had a very structured system to get those approvals done, get the things put in the right places from a hierarchy perspective. So instead of undoing any of that process, we automated it and we turned it into every update that was made on the PeopleSoft side. We would be able to read through a direct integration, give the administrators an opportunity through the picture that you're seeing here to say, okay, yep, I see there's a new piece of metadata. I approve of where this should be, and then see a status of, yes, this was pushed in appropriately, so that all of this could happen before you got to data load times. So simply improving that metadata automation system saved their administrators, lots of time during the close cycles and even before and after those close cycles.
Great. Now going on to what we all would joke is maybe the more fun part of the conversation, but I do want to emphasize that it is a table stakes, and definitely improving the close is incredibly important to making sure any project can happen, right? And also that you have a strong actuals base before planning. Now, building on that and working with partnership between Delaware North and Black Diamond Advisory, there were solutions like the accordion rolling forecast and our compensation planning solution that we really work with Delaware North to transform their planning. Kathy, if you could talk about the three areas of that and how that was applied to this project, that would be great. And then we'll get into a bit of an example later on as well too.
Yeah, so BDA and what we built in OneStream, or what they built for us in OneStream, was a lot more than these three pieces. I just want to, specify that. But we're going to really focus on three highlights, and that was driver-based planning, event planning, and then the salaried compensation model, or labor compensation. And so, what did we want to have done? By simplifying the process, we wanted to make sure that we named our key performance indicators for each one of our subsidiaries, and in making changes to those indicators, that all of the additional calculations would automatically flow. So, very typical, you have revenues, you want cost of sales to go directly against it. You wanted a growth rate, you wanted it to apply. There are many different key performance indicators by each one of our hospitality locations, gaming being much different than parks, and so forth. But we wanted to make sure that we knew what those key performance indicators were, and we wanted to apply them and make sure that they flowed down accordingly. We also wanted to make sure that where we could, we wanted to standardize. Again, labor, hourly labor is pretty similar of how we wanted to plan for those pieces on 4 of our 7 units. So let's just use one cube view, not 7 different ones with everyone. So we wanted to make sure, that we're standardizing where we can. So how did we then do it? We used historical trends, seasonality, and these KPI rates, and uses of the indicators, and we simplified methods. We used either growth rates or current trends or decline rates in some instances, and we applied those to a very cyclical measure by which most of our businesses run. And you're allowed then to easily change your KPIs to push down to all of those other pieces. And as always, you need to allow for adjustments because nothing is perfect. You build it 80-20 so that you have the ability then to make adjustments where possible and where needed.
That's great, Kathy. And then can you talk a little bit about, elements of driver-based planning involves individuals, in some cases in finance, losing what they feel is important levels of detail. Can you talk a little bit about what Delaware North did to align on I'll call it the right level of planning, at least for Delaware North?
Yeah, so back to the long-range culture that is Delaware North, there has always been a fear, and I was one of those people back at the field for almost 12 years building the plan of you needed to build down to the base level of every account, because what if the senior management asked a question? And those pieces we needed to slightly strip away, because those what ifs were bogging us down with regards to true flow and measurement of what, again, our overall task was in doing forecasting and planning. When you're talking about a $4 billion company, the ones and twosies don't matter, right? We needed to get a better focus. And so with that, we really spent a lot of time looking at our chart of accounts and creating a hierarchy by which we said, here is the right level by which we should be planning. And the roll-ups of these are material enough and will give us the best explanations to our senior management at the right level. So we spent a lot of time going through our chart of accounts and knowing and where that rationale was. And I think that made it a lot easier as we've gone through now the forecasting module from since February. We've been using it, and a lot easier to not get stuck in the weeds of the little stuff, that we look at the big material items instead.
Yeah, that's great. And also your point around making sure that the subsidiaries are aligned, to that, I think is incredibly important as well too, to make sure that there's the buy-in.
Absolutely. And in doing so, it was the buy-in from all our directors of finance across the board of saying, yep, this is the right level.
And then now into an actual example, and you can really see the flexibility of OneStream and how the team worked together to implement this in a very timely manner. Kathy, if you can talk about an example of how this was applied, and this slide is probably hard for folks to read in terms of capture, but maybe Kathy, if you could walk through a specific example, that'd be great.
Yeah, so on the left-hand side, showing just 5 different kind of driver-based pieces and how they flowed down to bottom level. But what I'm going to specifically talk to is the parks and resorts, and what we did in building a tiered model for our parks and our hotel locations of what the relationship was between occupied rooms and labor hours, right? Because you need housekeepers to clean those rooms. And so that's the measurement by which we used. So we had 5 tiers, and each of those tiers, not being fully linear, were slightly different with regards to how labor hours were attached to each one of those occupied room rates. As we moved through planning, we would choose then the number of occupied rooms per month. In the lower section, again, a little bit hard to read. And the tier would know where it fell within that tier and how to apply the number of hours that would be needed to satisfy that number of occupied rooms. Historical trends would pull in your average rates from previous years. We'd be able to apply a growth factor to those rates. And lo and behold, the calculation of worked hours needed for those hotels would automatically calculate for a department. That would then push over into a full labor model to get the T&B rates, and calculation additionally off of those numbers. So, so instead of focusing on all of the pieces with, overall of looking at your payroll, we said, let's look at occupied rooms first. And what does that drive? And it drives then again your labor hours needed for how busy or not your hotels are.
That's great, Kathy, too. And you really sort of see there too the ability to use a driver-based plan, enter an input and adjust as needed. And then from there, also linkages between the models themselves too, as well too. And, and especially like a platform like OneStream, that is definitely more possible, and the tool provides that capability, to customers as well too.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and some people would think if you're using all of these types of drivers, why do you need adjustments? And again, nothing is perfect, right? There's that 80-20 rule. So I'll give a fine example, to continue on with the hotels here. We have certain hotels and state parks by which we run that are seasonal. Shenandoah outside of DC runs it's closed actually from November 1st through April 1st. So the occupied rooms is not a good measure when we need to do a deep clean before we open that building, and we need housekeepers in the building with no occupied rooms. So you have to adjust accordingly at certain points in time without having occupied rooms. And so leaving that means to always adjust, that made a lot of the controllers happy across the board, because again, the overall, the overarching, concept is great, but there's always going to be some type of adjustment needed.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, Kathy. And as we go on to, looking at large volumes of data, and for this particular component, we're going to talk about event-based planning. But if you do think about this could apply to other large volumes of data at other customers, like products and other components. But if we specifically focus, Kathy, on how event-based planning and the linkages between labor and expense planning was included, that would be great as well too, as part of this.
Yeah, so this was pretty much a focus directly related to our sports service venue. So these are concessions and suites and a number of different clubs by which we do in sports arenas. Within the United States, we have 55 locations, as well as UK and Australia. And what we didn't have before is that we did not have a buildup, and truly be able to plan by event. Now, we don't know every event, but again, history tells us, certain things. We always know at our baseball locations that we're going to have 81 games. Don't know when those 81 games are going to be, but we know those 81 games. We We always know in football we're going to get 8, so forth, so on. So definitely a rationale with regards to being able to build then by event from base up, which again is something that we haven't been able to do. So conceptually, very similar to what we did with parks and the tiers, is that we created tiers by per caps, so revenue by attendees, and operating labor percentages based on attendance. And so the driver then is attendance rather than occupied rooms when we're talking about parks. So the driver then is attendance. What is also really interesting about this one is that we were able to do it by event. So you might say that, well, what's the difference of an event? A concert should be a concert. Well, a concert is not a concert. A concert, when it's Taylor Swift versus a concert that is Morgan Wallen, you're going to see a much higher rate of beer probably sold at the Morgan Wallen concert than you are at the Taylor Swift concert. So there are some of these by which we know, and we are then able to push down to the level of how we want to plan those concerts, pushing more to beer and less, less to a wine, for example, or vice versa, with other events. And so this one, again, very similar to what we did with the tiered planning. This was able to give us down to the detail of doing each event separately.
Yeah. And then Joe,
I think made that possible was using a relational blend solution to get that done. So this was a lot of data, and OneStream, I mean, anybody who knows OneStream knows that the being able to combine the cube-based approach with a relational approach is a secret to success. So that giant volume of data that we're talking about, a lot of times we're planning these events on a daily or weekly basis. Instead of having to build out some daily or weekly model within a cube itself, we did that all in relational tables. So those revenue syncs that we're talking about, those downstream accounts that get recalculated on sync, that reads back from the relational tables, gets that information, plugs in what's needed into the cubes for planning purposes. So it really sped up that process, and it enabled Delaware North to bring in lots of different data inputs that would bring a traditional cube model to its knees, able to run those calculations very quickly and smoothly with that relational blended solution.
Yeah, and I think one of the other pieces to add on to that is different from Excel and the usage of Excel and then pushing data to Hyperion. We had real-time changes, right? We could run a calculation and a consolidation within minutes of making the change. And I'm telling you, within 15 seconds, did we have a result? And we had a full calculation, right in front of us. And that is obviously not something that we had with working in Excel and or in Hyperion in the past.
Yeah. And, Kathy, that's a good segue to, when Taylor Swift joins the Jets game at MetLife, which, is something that you manage, that's something where you need to look at increased attendance, more volume with respect to sales, and actually maybe build into that plan. This would give you the capability to do something like that.
It would. If it happened a little bit earlier in the forecasting prod, and earlier in the month, we probably would have forecasted that slightly differently if we would have known that Taylor Swift and Kelsey were an item, right?
Yep.
So
awesome. And then, going from event-based planning and very large volumes of data to actually, compensation and labor planning, and then looking at that, Kathy, if you can chat a little bit about, how you leverage the compensation planning within OneStream, within Delaware North as well too.
So we were a little bit lucky with this one because BDA already had a platform by which we were able to leverage. They didn't have to build something separate for us. They already had this built, and we were able to use it. So for Delaware North, all subsidiary salaried associates are on this platform across the world with regards to overall, again, salaried compensation, not hourly. So it was, again, very easy tool to use. Once a month, we update our census of all of our active users. The one thing we needed to do, which was a little bit out of the norm, is obviously salary data is highly, highly confidential. So limiting and having the application by which we have limiting who gets to see that detailed level of access. And, we had great strides with security measures, and making sure only certain people have access to this data at this detail level. But in any event, we're able to actually plan all the way down to an individual person if needed. Their job code would assign a bonus percentage calculations on top of that. We, from a corporate side, are able to say, okay, we want to plan at 90% of overall bonus potential, and we're able to make that change one time, and it affects every employee out there. And there's about 6,000 employees that are salaried across the board. So again, where we would have Excel models and have to make all of these changes manually, we have a one and done solution of making a change and applying to everybody across the board. We're able to add in new positions. So if we know we're going to hire somebody Q2 of 2024, we'll put that in as a vacant position. Financial analyst, starting 4/1, and it'll add that salary with all additional pieces on top of it. Once it's done in the compensation model, it then summarizes all the data of that department, and it pushes it then into our forecasting module where the detail does not exist. Again, more people could use it because you're just applying T&B rates and so forth, but the calculation itself, very secure and easy to use, and then pushes it down into the overall forecasting module.
Yeah, Kathy, appreciate that. On our people's planning solution, we call it we call it travel and compensation planning. It is built to interact with the according to the forecast that we're showing you. But the important thing that Kathy noted that we were able to work through at BDA was being able to grant access to that table for the highly private data around everybody's salaries to a non-administrator of the system. So even the system admins of OneStream don't actually have access to that table, and they don't have any way to get it. In this instance, we've highlighted one person on there might be two in the HR department on the Delaware North team that do have access to that table and can maintain it. So that's built into the solution as well. So just wanted to mention that.
That is a great add as well. And then building upon this, if we talk about the last, I call it the piece of the puzzle, Kathy, and this is something that, both you and Joe probably have some, I guess a lot of pride in terms of actually seeing rolled out here too. It's really around the insights that Delaware North needs on a weekly basis and to make decisions, based on that information. If you could talk a little bit about the weekly operating report, or internally known as the WAR, that would be fantastic as well too.
Yeah, so I'm sure a lot of companies have something similar, or a way to review results on a slightly timely manner versus just waiting for month end to happen. And in the Delaware North world, our WAR, weekly operating report, is probably the most distributed and highly visible report that Delaware North has. So outside of the scope of forecasting and planning, we did this about a 6-month build of creating our weekly operating report. There was a few things that we could not change. When we distributed this go live out of OneStream to our senior management, the direction for us was that it needed to be a non-event for the senior management. They almost didn't need to know that we made the change. A little bit, heartbreaking to those that worked on it for 6 months, but when we did turn it over, it was just that. It was a non-event. And this was huge when we turned this over and we completed this project. So very similar to what we did in forecasting, we went through the chart of accounts and we slimmed it down even more. This is a very high level scale by which the report is distributed and done. Because again, we don't have a lot of actual results, but the actual results by which we definitely sourced. So we made a very simple process by which we sourced revenues and payroll, hourly payroll that is, directly from the source systems, because all that is known already. Then we applied certain drivers to those methodologies to do other calculations, whether it be using our forecast module for controllables and non-controllables and saying, take the monthly dollar amount and divide it by 4 or 5, we're a fiscal operator. Take those simple calculations and in turn create for us a very easy report that we should be able to do in a little bit of time, but have a lot of accuracy. And that's exactly what we did. When we tested this, we brought in all of our subsidiaries into one room. I think we had 2 or 3 people from each subsidiary, and we sat in a room. And once we went through and we explained all of the pieces and we went through testing, there were people that were able to do their war in less than 5 minutes because the data was there. They were seeding it with expense calculations that were meaningful. And when they looked at what the result was from what they did in the test versus what they actually issued in back timeframes, they were within a couple $1,000s. And you're not going to get any closer in a war within a couple $1,000s. So we weren't, to get precision. We were to get comfortable with regards to reporting to our senior management a true number that when we close our books at the end of the month, we're within reason. And that's exactly what we did, and we continue to do. We've been live with the WAR system now since July 1st. So the first week of fiscal July is when we started reporting. And we continue to make changes to it and enhancements to it to make it even better than what it was. But overall, the tool has really saved time by most of our controllers who truly understand, the application itself.
The fun thing about the war, when we first started the implementation, we sat down and I was leading the consolidation discussions, and we hadn't even started talking about planning yet. And we got in a giant room, and Chris Lozbone, the VP of FP&A, came in and said, "Hey, this is all great. We're going to have great discussions today, but I just want to let you know that the single most important thing that we're ever going to undertake is replacing the war." No pressure. And he walked out of the room. So the war really was the end game and the focus. And what we were able to do by paying attention to the blocking and tackling of the metadata solution, the consolidation, automation, the FP&A, and breaking that down into everything that Kathy just described. Once we got all of that done, it fed so seamlessly into the war that it really became a non-event. It was at a kind of a wrap discussion for the steering committee. They said that the go live for the war was a non-event, which is about the best thing you could possibly hear. So interestingly, war is in a different application. It's in a different cube itself within OneStream, but that's just to make the transition a lot faster and seamless to the users. But we took a solution that it took 6 out of 7 days of the week for the team to get done. And within a couple of days, and Kathy, tell me if I got this wrong, within a couple of days of using the war, we had already taken a day off of the overall process.
Yeah, we have people issuing them faster than they were before. Again, and the more important, I think, is with more accuracy. Looking at the comparison of month end, and there's always going to be certain things we don't report in the war. We don't report one-time events. There's always going to be a disconnect to a certain degree. But taking those pieces out, getting to a closer number, we're seeing that more and more. And again, as the users get more practice and they truly understand with full year now going through the plan in the system and how everything truly connects, I think all we're going to continue to see is closer and closer accuracy with regards to the use of this application.
Yeah, and it's such a fantastic illustration of, taking time away from the busy work of creating a report and giving it back to the analyzing of the data that goes into that report, right? Having the analysts spend time on what they're really good at, as opposed to, worrying about formatting a report just because the executives have to have it. So it was a really cool thing to see, to take that, albatross of a system that they had in place and turn it into something that could be done much more effectively and seamlessly.
Mm-hmm. I have to say, one of the things that was noted on a monthly call that I had with our gaming division was that in the old world, part of what we would do is the report is a comparison of actuals to budget. And we budget monthly. So there was always a way that we needed to spread that monthly budget into the weeks. That process used to take the lead analyst from gaming an entire day out of his month to help the units complete that. That task is now done by the field and could be done in about a 15-minute time frame by just simply running the calcs by which they created from the month before, reusing those same seating mechanisms, because most things don't really change. And now that process is off the hands of my lead analyst into the hands of someone else who could do it still faster and better than what this poor guy had to go through every single month with spending a day of his time just literally watching rules run. So again, as Joe said, taking the time to actually do what we're meant to do in our positions.
Yeah. And, this is really true integrated planning and actually making decisions in a timely manner, right? To support decision making too, which is really a good segue into this very long quote from here, Kathy, that I think you can probably summarize in a much easier fashion from a Delaware North perspective.
Yeah, so you guys could read it as it's sitting on the thing on the screen, but really at the end of the day, it's what Joe and I just said. It's really giving back time to our department to actually analyze data versus validate data. And anybody who's used Hyperion before, I think that probably 90% of our overall job in the past was never being comfortable with the data that was presented, because if you ran it 15 minutes later, it would give you a different result. And that was scary. That was not something that we wanted to see. And we don't see that anymore. We're comfortable with the data that's coming through, and we're able to make decisions and be able to process that in a much timely manner and actually analyze the data by which we have.
Great. Then if we, that does conclude our discussion today. And, Margaret, I think you've been monitoring the chat and seeing if there's any questions there too. I don't see any, but, it would be good to open the floor, and we'll take maybe a bit of a pause to see if anyone on the line here has questions.
Looks like Lauren has one.
Kathy and Kevin and Joe, thanks for all of this. It was really helpful. I guess, Kathy, I'm just curious, with such a big transformation, can you kind of talk a little bit more about how the change management side of this engagement went? Give us some insights in that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Something I didn't speak to earlier. I probably should have. Delaware North culture, again, being on a lot of projects throughout the 25 years that I've been with the company. We always get to a certain point and then we fail. And so we knew we needed some help with change management, and we actually did use BDA, a separate venture itself, with them helping us with regards to completing that change management. And it went from us kind of identifying key people out in the field that we knew would be using the system, surveying them, having them understand, with all of our communications that we were sending, were we doing a good job? Were we telling them the right answer? Sometimes we would get back, no, we were not. And so we were able to quickly change then and make directional, decisions with regards to, what we need to inform the people in a different manner out at the field. We knew what was going on at corporate, but the field didn't know what was going on. And so they helped us with, writing memos and again, those surveys. And I think the second time we surveyed the same people, we probably had 50% more or better, response, because the first one, they just didn't know what it was. Once they started truly understanding, they knew what it was, they started to touch and feel it, and now they were able to respond and give their suggestions back. So kudos to BDA, because it's definitely something that we have always struggled with at Delaware North. And again, one of few projects that I've ever seen in finance get over the line, and I think that was definitely a big help to us.
Yeah, every time we engage in something like this, we always talk about change management. A lot of the times the clients are starting to say, we've got an in-house change management team. We can handle that. In this case, Delaware North actually does have an in-house change management team. But they still wanted our expertise on how to implement CPM and do change management for CPM. So while we didn't spend, a ton of time going through that process, what we did was we established the ground rules as to the best way to get that communication done, the best way to find out what, and keep people informed as to what we were doing. So that was a nice part of the engagement. It was early on, and we got great feedback, and it really did help set the stage for what we were doing down the road.
And I think now that we are in a place, again, we've been using the system since February of this year. We went live with close in May, and now we're in our first round of planning. I think one of the excitement of this system that, again, we didn't have before was every other system implementation seemed to be a one and done. And I think what we're seeing now is that this is ever going to be evolving. We have a SharePoint site that we're creating for, training mechanisms and, requests for enhancements and being able to make changes. And we want to continuously evolve this system, into something. It's never going to be perfect, but there's always going to be means to make things better. And I think the excitement from the units with regards to being able to make those requests, that again, the corporate team isn't just making decisions, by themselves without reaching out to them. Everyone could see what the requests are. Yeah, we'll have to prioritize them, and there will be some that we won't be able to do for certain reasons, but their voice being heard is something that probably has never really been done before. And this is our way of saying that, like, this is your system. It's not my system. It's your system. It's the user system, and continuing to improve on it.
Great. It's awesome. And
Thank
Margaret,
you.
were there any other questions that were on the line there?
Nothing in the chat, but if anybody else has any questions, feel free to jump in. We still have a few minutes left.
Sounds good. And then there's Joe's picture and my picture too, and our contact information. Kathy, one of the good things that you did say there in the closing out of it is, the support from Delaware North management, even with respect to the change in how you plan from there, but also the constant improvement and Delaware North taking ownership of the application too is really critical. I think in terms of actually having successful OneStream rollout and for it to really transform planning. And it is great to see Delaware North take that ownership and enhance the application and really own the application that you plan in. And just like you said, you're going through a planning cycle now and you're kind of working through it, which is great, and you're really harnessing the power of the platform there too.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I wanted to add, even though it was in addition to it being a very successful implementation, the fact that they are growing the platform and now are looking at taking over their account recs process, we've also engaged with Delaware North on the Summit Services side. So that's our kind of support solution. So yes, we've empowered Delaware North users to do a lot of things themselves, but we've augmented that with our ability to handle, smaller support requests, maybe build out a couple of calculations, things that don't necessarily require a full SOW, things that our team can help the Delaware North team do, or maybe just give them some guidance on. So really the combination, Delaware North taking advantage of the full suite of what we have to offer has really been a great success story for both of our teams, for sure.
Right.
Yep.
Hey, Joe, it's John Shattuck. Can I make a quick comment?
Please, Joe.
So I just wanted to reiterate what Joe said about Chris Lozapone and the weekly operating report, because in a separate meeting, Chris said the exact same thing to me. He said, if we can't get the weekly operating report and make it seamless and, oh, by the way, save us time, he said the project will not be deemed a success. So I just want to, reiterate what you said. It was very important.
Awesome.
For those who don't know, John is the OneStream representative for Delaware North. So
That's great. Well, thank you, John, for adding that. And then we will give back people 7 minutes in their day to either grab a coffee, grab lunch if you're on Eastern time, or get ready for lunch if you're on Mountain time or Pacific time there too. Or if you're in Europe, go for a beer.
And I did just want to add, Thank you, Kevin, Joe, and Kathy for presenting today. And I know some of you had to join late or drop early, and some people weren't able to make it. So again, I will work with our marketing team. We will get the recording published, and I will be in touch with where to access it. And thank you again, everyone.
Great. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.